In the first 1,000 words you're likely to learn in Chinese, you'll see the image of meat again and again. Not just meat, of course. You'll also see bone, blood, fur, and all kinds of other images that aren't vegan. What's surprising, and slightly amusing, is how often these images have nothing to do with the modern meaning of the words in question. The character on screen will definitely be one of the first 1,000 characters you learn in the language. It has a very broad meaning, similar to the English word indicate, and its meaning changes quite a bit in context, as you see with this example. What is it a picture of? Well, if you learn the modern meaning first, you might be shocked to learn that it's supposed to be an altar, and specifically, an altar for animal sacrifice, with blood running down the sides. That may seem like a huge leap of interpretation for a symbol that's only composed of 5 lines. And, as you can see, the meaning isn't entirely obvious from the seal script either. However, when you look into the history of what the word formerly meant, and its links to other characters, the explanation starts to become easier to believe. The character on the right-hand side here is linked in meaning to religious ceremonies, and it depicts the same altar, but this time with 2 extra symbols above it. The one on the top left is the meat radical, a symbol that you're about to see with several variations. The symbol on the top right is a human hand, easier to recognize in the seal script than it is in the modern form. So, when we put the pieces together, we have a hand offering meat over an altar, confirming the theory that the basic symbol we're discussing here isn't just a religious altar, but is specifically an altar for animal sacrifice. In the middle of the screen here, you see the meat radical in its modern form, with the ancient seal script on its right-hand side. You can see, clearly enough, that the complex image of the meat above the altar does preserve the same original pictograph, although it now appears in various forms. Here you see one of the most common changes in the way the meat radical is drawn. The picture of a bear on the left-hand side of the screen here does in fact have a piece of meat in its mouth. I know that it's hard to believe this is an image of a bear, and it's even stranger to think that the symbol for meat has now become identical to the symbol used for the moon. But the bear is, in fact, walking around with a piece of meat in its mouth, although it might be more poetic if the bear were carrying the moon. Just this one example will probably remind you of the image of the moon in a number of the most common characters in the language. And if you now go back to take a second look at them, you'll discover that they're in fact depicting a piece of meat. As with most of the world's languages, the verb to have is one of the most commonly spoken words in Chinese, and the character really does depict a hand holding meat. Some textbooks will actually lie to you and encourage students to imagine that it's a hand reaching out to touch the moon. As romantic as that may seem, it isn't the real etymology of the character. Here's another character that's probably going to be in the list of the first 1,000 words that you learn. Again, you're left to wonder if you're looking at the moon or if you're looking at a simplified form of the meat radical. The clerical script, seen here, doesn't give us too much of a hint. In the seal script, however, we can clearly see that it is meat and not the moon on the bottom half of the character. So, as you can now imagine, the whole language is full of both visible and invisible meat. In some cases, we know the history of the character very clearly, and in some cases it's a bit of a mystery. There are still debates about the character on the left-hand side of the screen now, and of how this came to mean the color green. But there's no debate about the character in the middle of the screen. It does indeed depict roasting dog meat, although the modern meaning has nothing to do with dogs, meat, or roasting. Finally, the meat radical in the character on the right-hand side is especially annoying for vegans, as that is the same fu sound that is in the word tofu. So when you're looking at the ingredients for vegetarian food, you're often stumbling over the meat radical. There are enough Chinese vegans now that I've seen attempts at spelling reform to get around this problem of meat ingredients appearing in the written names of vegan food. I doubt that anyone has made an index of these changes in how written words appear, but I've noticed a few examples on menus and storefront signs so far. In this case, the reformed spelling of the word removes the egg from the compound word meaning cake. However, the second half of the word still includes the image of roast meat. Specifically, you're looking at a lamb or goat roasting over a fire on the right-hand side of the character. Given the strange history of Chinese language reform, you can ask yourself what's next. So many characters were changed in the 20th century, and sometimes for ideological reasons, that it certainly isn't impossible that we'll see the meat and blood disappear from a few characters in the next 100 years.